Hello friends, this is Cara-Renee with B.Reborn Art and Healing. I hope that you're doing well today. I thought I would go ahead and create a quick video of a couple of cute and easy watercolor cards that I did using stamped images from Unity Stamp Company. I'm going to be using my Mimic Kolinsky Creative Mark watercolor brushes, my archival ink to stamp the images, and my stamp platform so that I can get a really good impression. I did stamp out all three of these images. I only ended up painting two of them in this tutorial. And so this is my Tim Holtz stamp platform, which is, I don't know what I'd do without it. It's such a gift because it allows you, as I've mentioned before, it allows you to stamp an image multiple times. If you don't get a good impression the first time, as long as you don't move the paper, you can go ahead and stamp the image again and again and again if you need to. And often on watercolor paper, you do need to stamp more than once because it's very thick and porous paper. The Strathmore, I'm using Strathmore watercolor cards that are already pre-scored to be made into cards. And so they're really convenient and they actually stamped really well. So I went ahead and used those. And I do wipe off my stamp really well with a baby wipe before I store it away again. And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the cup, and then I'm ready to paint. I'm just using this old watercolor block that I've used all the paper in it just to kind of have a hardboard to tape my watercolor projects to. Sometimes, depending on the quality of paper, you don't need it to be on anything, but in this case, I wanted it to be taped down at least a little bit. So I got out an old acrylic brush just to kind of, it's a stiffer brush and it allows me to kick up the paint in my palette a little bit easier, and it doesn't damage, then I don't damage my watercolor brushes. So I'm just pre-mixing my colors there, the Permanent Matter Lake, Transparent Yellow Oxide, and the Permanent Blue Violet in those three pans there that you can see. I have 2 cups of water, one for dirt, one's dirty and one's clean, and then a rag to be able to wipe off my brush before I bring it to the paper if I need to. The first thing I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and paint this heart with the Permanent Blue Violet. And I'm dropping in lighter color here at the first, and then I'll come back in with a darker, drop in some darker purple there in the crevices where the heart is tucked behind that flower. I didn't go through a great deal of detail on this. It was kind of fast and easy. And so I hope that you can follow it and that it makes sense for you. I didn't want it to be complicated. I just wanted to have a good time. So I am preparing my paint there with to paint my cone. And so I'm using the Transparent Yellow Oxide. And then for my darker shade for the cone, I'm using Transparent Oxide Brown. They work really, really great together. They're both super transparent, which is the beauty of artist grade watercolor. I am very spoiled in terms of watercolor. I splurged early on in my watercolor journey, and so I have some really good paint, and I'm really grateful for that because I'm a firm believer that paint, paper, and brushes do have an impact on the process for learning how to watercolor. We know that the artist makes the art, but the products do help, because if you get frustrated by how things are working because of the products you're using, especially in watercolor, it can cause you to give up. So I highly recommend you buy what you can afford. And here I'm coming in, stop my yak in there, with the Transparent Yellow Oxide on this beautiful flower. And then coming in again with the Cad Yellow medium, just to create a darker tone there in some places. And I do come back and darken it up a little bit later as well, just to kind of bring that dark from the center out. And then I missed a couple parts, so I went ahead and got those again. And then here I'm going to come in with a little bit of that darker Cad Yellow. And I do dry in between each of these colors because I wanted the video to be fairly quick. And so I didn't let it air dry. I just dried it with my heat tool, and then I went to the next thing. So I'm going to go, and the technique I'm using here is wet into wet. And so it's the matter of wetting your paper first and then dropping in the color. And again, in some wet and wet techniques that I use in other projects, I am a little bit more, I take my time, I'm a little more precise. But in this case, I was just wanting to get some color in there, some pale pink. And then I'll come in here and darken it up with a more concentrated pigment of that same color, the Permanent Matter Lake. I actually just received this in the mail. It took 3 weeks to get it. And it's one of my favorite colors. So I was like desperately waiting for it because I was out. So it finally came. And so I had to get it in my palette and get it dried up a little bit before I could use it. So now I'm going to come in and do my leaves. And so I'm going to use that transparent yellow oxide and my sap green. This sap green is not from Rembrandt. I don't care for their sap green. It's a little bit too green. It's just fake green to me. And so I really like the sap green. So this is my M gram that I just have in a nice little square that I can, and it has a magnet on the bottom so I can move it from palette to palette. Cause it's my favorite sap green. So, I'm coming in with that transparent yellow oxide, wet in wet, and then bringing in the, sap green as well. I did mix out some ultramarine blue, but I did not end up using it because, again, I wasn't too concerned about realism here. I just wanted to get paint on paper and create a couple of quick cards, and so I did not end up using that. And then I'll be coming down to the bottom and coloring that other greenery just with some sap green here in a moment. This greenery was a little bit harder to define, so I kind of was just putting color wherever there was some black marks from the stamp. It was a little bit hard to distinguish what was what, so, but it's all good. Again, it's just a quick watercolor card, nothing special, just something you could drop in the mail to a friend just to say hello. It's just super fun, easy project, and a great way to practice some watercolor play, so. And I am coming in and painting that ribbon around the cone with that same purple that I painted the heart with. And again, that's the Permanent Blue Violet. And then I'm coming in with a stronger layer of the Permanent Matter Lake, just in some spots around the flower, just to kind of accentuate some of the deeper areas of the petals. Not being, again, very particular, because I just wanted this to be quick. So, no stress. That's my motto. No stress. Watercolor can be a little bit intimidating and stressful if you're a perfectionist like me. And so I'm just now returning to it, with a little bit more grace for myself and just really playing a lot more than worrying about the outcome. So that's why I thought I would go ahead and do a video and let you see what the process looks like for me. And so I just picked a stamp set from my collection, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp that on the right, up on the top of the card, and with my black archival ink from Ranger. And it says, "Find joy in the ordinary." And I thought, perfect for this time. I'm going a little buggy here at home and would really love to get out, would really love to see my grandchildren. And so I'm just trying to create and trying to take advantage of the time that I have. And because I didn't use the stamp platform, I didn't get a really good impression. So I'm coming in with my permanent marker and just redrawing those lines just to get a really crisp impression there. And then we'll be moving on to the other card here in just a second. It's a cute little card with a cup of tea or coffee, whichever your preference is. I prefer tea, although I do drink coffee for survival. Tea is my favorite thing. And so I'm painting this with creamer. Yum. So I'm using the transparent yellow oxide just to create the lighter tones in the liquid there. Tea or coffee, whichever you prefer. And then the darker transparent oxide brown to create some darker tones and to create kind of an illusion of movement in the tea there. which I think I did okay for it being a pretty quick project. And then I do dry after I finish this layer because I'm going to come around the lip of that cup with a thicker application of that transparent oxide brown, just to kind of define that lip a little bit more. And then I'll be doing the handle with the same colors, the yellow oxide and the oxide brown. And if you're looking for an inexpensive way to experiment with watercolors, I would really encourage you to check out the Strathmore watercolor cards. I've had them in my stash. I use them, but I don't generally craft or watercolor paint directly on them. I think I'm getting a little more confident with my watercolor and my ability to control the pigment and the water. And so it worked out really well for these projects. I was really pleased and will definitely be doing more of that. So here I'm coming in and doing a little bit of a shadow, or my interpretation of a shadow. Again, similar to contrast and things like that, it's not my strength. And so I thought, well, I'm just doing this simple card. I'll go ahead and play with a little bit of shadow under the plate and around the plate. And because that flower is hanging off largely on the right-hand side of the plate, I thought I would go ahead and draw that shadow out to the right a little bit more. I don't know if that's actually truly realistic or not, but I figured this was a good way to practice how to do a shadow. I don't know if it's right, but it's okay. And then again, I'm getting out that acrylic brush to just kick up that paint. It helps me to not kind of wrench on my watercolor brushes too much by trying to get the paint out of the palette. So, and again, using the Mimic Kolinsky brushes. I probably will be putting those out in my outdoor studio or something because I don't care for them. I've got a couple that have loose ferrules, and I haven't left them in water or anything, but they're just not my favorite. I have others that I love. So I think I'll go ahead and put them out in the outdoor studio and use them out there. So it'll probably be the last time I use them in here. So even though this pigment looks very blue, it's not. This is the effect of my webcam, unfortunately. The color that I chose is a turquoise, and it is very greenish blue, just not very well represented on the webcam. So I apologize for that. Hope to be able to upgrade my camera in the future. So coming in with a little bit darker pigment here, just to give it a little bit more interest, a little bit more color. And again, moving fairly quickly, doing wet into wet. The first layer was wet, and because I did not pause between, I'm applying this darker pigment on top of already wet pigment, so it works really well. The biggest challenge with watercolor is controlling the water and the dryness of the paper, and how the pigment and water reacts to the paper. So it's a finicky medium, although it is my favorite. When I'm feeling stressed out or I can't sleep, which has been a lot lately, I get up and just come in here and do a half hour or so of just watercolor play, and it just helps me relax. So it is one of my favorite mediums. It's not the one that I'm the best at, but it is my first love, and I would love to master it and be able to come up with my own style eventually. So here I dried that saucer before I came in with a darker layer of pigment of that same turquoise around the edge of the plate. And then again, drying, always drying in between, because you don't want, if I didn't dry the plate and I started painting this flower, the pink would bleed into the turquoise, and it would not give it the desired result. So I did dry in between. Lots of times I'll move around on a bigger project to areas that aren't touching each other, but in this small image, it's really hard to do that. So again, I went in wet into wet, so wet water on the entire flower, and then came in with my permanent matter lake, which is a beautiful pink, pinkish red, and went ahead and gave it a good coat there, and then coming in with a more concentrated pigment of that same color in some of the darker passages on the on the flower. So, and again, I wasn't looking for extreme realism here. So you can see I'm moving fairly quickly, just kind of blending that color out and just getting some color on the flower. When I'm doing a bigger project, I do take a little bit more time with the blending and making sure that there's some realism in the shadows and things like that. But this is just a quick watercolor card, so I tried to not stress out too much about it. So, and I hope that it teaches you something. I also hope it inspires you to just play. Watercolor can be very intimidating. It's not nearly as forgiving as acrylic or mixed media, but it is very, very satisfying. In my opinion. So coming in and painting my leaves, starting out with a transparent yellow oxide and then my sap green. And again, this is my M-Gram sap green. M-Gram is my favorite watercolor, but my palette is much bigger. And so I went ahead and put some sap green in a little, can't think of what they're called right now, just a little square, and it has a magnet on the bottom so I can move it from palette to palette. And forgive me if I already said that, I might have earlier in the video. And then finishing off the greenery with just some straight sap green. And then I'll be coming in with a darker bit of that permanent matter lake. The stamp has some lines that indicate where you might have darker passages of color. And so that's kind of what I'm doing there. Again, not being too fussy about it, not being too particular, but I thought I would go ahead and do that as well. And then I picked a sentiment from my one of my Unity stamps that has just a bunch of sentiments. If you have never checked out Unity Stamp Company online, they are phenomenal. They create a red rubber stamp. They're unmounted, and they don't have any sticky back on them, but they will stick to a platform or a stamp block. And their artwork is absolutely incredible. I have a large supply of Unity stamps. They're one of my favorite suppliers. So really, really love them. So I'll be sure to put that in the video description, or the supplies list, excuse me, as well as all the other items that I used here. But the stamp sentiment that I chose for this card was, it says, "Hello, darling." And I don't know if you noticed that when you hold the card this way, it looks like the cup is backwards. But I did that on purpose because I wanted it to have that effect like I'm handing the cup to the person sitting across the table from me. Seems apropos with social distancing, as we cannot sit across the table with someone and share a cup of coffee or tea right now. But anyway, that was kind of the way I was thinking at the time. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you'll come back. You'll check out my YouTube channel, that you'll like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great weekend. Blessings, blessings, blessings to you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.